Suddenly, the police announced, "We've urgently transported a child found in the car. You're under arrest." Shocked by the unexpected arrival of the police at my home, I couldn't believe what I heard. "What? I don't have a child," I responded in confusion. The officers seemed equally puzzled. It appeared they had identified the car's owner through the license plate, and it was indeed registered under my name. Could it be holding a suspicion? I rushed to the hospital where the child was taken. There, a boy around the age of 5 lay on an emergency bed, his face red with roughness. My heart pulsated wildly at the sight of his familiar face. From that moment on, my life changed dramatically, with this child at the center. I am Emily, a 33-year-old working from home. I started dating my husband Michael in college, as we were in the same club, and we married after graduation. Despite being married for 10 years, we couldn't have children. We underwent fertility treatments, but I learned that I had a condition making it difficult to conceive. Kind-hearted Michael reassured me, saying, "It's okay. Let's live happily, just the two of us." My in-laws were nice people, and since my brother-in-law already had a child, they never put pressure on me. However, I just felt bad for my parents who were looking forward to their grandchildren. Fortunately, since I lived near my parents, I made it a point to visit them frequently, if only John had a child. I have a younger brother, John, who is 7 years younger than me. Sometimes I find myself browsing through old photo albums, reminiscing about the days when John, as a toddler, would toddle after me, calling me sis. One day, while working at home, an incident occurred that shook me to the core. My doorbell rang incessantly, and in a panic, I checked the camera to find the police standing there. Without warning, the police announced, "We've urgently transported a child found in the car. You're under arrest." Shocked by this abrupt statement, I was at a loss for words. "What? I don't have a child," I stammered, and the officer replied, seeming just as baffled. In that moment, my mind was flooded with questions. According to the police, a passerby had noticed a car abandoned on the road with a limp child inside, reported it to the police, and the child was transported by ambulance to the emergency room. When I asked about the location of the car, it was in front of my parents' house. Unfortunately, my parents were away on a trip. The police identified the owner of the car from its license plate, and while the car was indeed registered under my name, the person using it was my younger brother, John. I used to lend my car to John, who had just gotten his license, and he took it when he left home. Since then, the car had been left in front of my parents' house, only brought out when it needed inspection and maintenance. Despite scolding him, my parents felt pity and took care of the vehicle's maintenance, thinking he might need it. But who was this child left behind in the car? Hurrying to the hospital, I approached the bed in the emergency room and saw just the top of a small head peeking out from a blanket. The curly, wavy hair reminded me instantly of someone. My heart raced as a childhood memory of John flashed before my eyes. Getting closer, I saw the face of a boy around 4 to 5 years old who looked strikingly like John. Could it be that this child is? Pondering this, I received a phone call from my mother, who was away, sounding panicked. John had called and asked me to take care of his child. He said he left the child in the car because we were not home under this blazing sun. What should we do? Informing the worried and panicking mother that the child had already been taken to the hospital and seemed likely to survive, she seemed relieved and said she would be back soon. I understood my mother's feelings that there was no time for a trip now. I knew this child was my brother's, but when was he born, and who is his mother? I explained to the police he's probably my brother's child, and decided to stay with the child. After that, I tried calling my brother several times, but I couldn't get through. Looking at the child, he seemed to be in pain, such a small body enduring so much pain. At that moment, a nurse came and handed me the clothes the child was wearing. After changing him into hospital pajamas, they were ragged and severely dirty, with the word Tom written on the tag. From his extreme thinness and the state of his clothes, it was evident that he had been through a lot. It was easy to imagine that Tom had been raised in a miserable environment. That evening, my mother returned from her trip and rushed to the hospital. John, she murmured, hugging Tom with tears flowing. Tom looked a lot like John. By the next day, Tom's condition had improved, but he seemed very scared. I gently asked him not to be frightened. "How old are you, Tom?" I inquired. 5 years old, he answered, spreading out one hand and adding his fingers. "Well, don't you speak so clearly?" I praised him and stroked his head, and he smiled for the first time. Still, Tom seemed thin, pale, and small. According to the doctor, there were bruises all over his body. I persuaded the police to let us take responsibility for the child until we could contact John and somehow avoided a report being made. 3 days later, Tom was discharged. I didn't want to dress him in his tattered clothes, so I bought new ones and had him changed into them. He looked even more intelligent and cute in them. Finally, I got through to John when we were leaving the hospital, but there was tremendous noise on the other end of the call. "How could you leave him in the car under the blazing sun?" "He was taken to the hospital." "He survived, didn't he?" "So it's fine," I argued. "He had bruises all over his body. Did you do this?" I questioned. "Thomas is clumsy. I was just disciplining him," John retorted without a hint of offense, leaving me out of words. "He's only 5 years old. He's stupid, can't even remember the letters. No matter how many times I tell him, it's annoying." "So I thought I'd leave him at our parents' house," he continued. I was shocked at my brother's verbal abuse of his son, thinking it might be better for him not to be with such a parent. "Furthermore," John said, "I'm in the middle of a casino jackpot right now," and hung up the phone. Seeing this, Tom, who looked worried, started to silently shed tears. I softly said, "It's going to be okay," and stroked his head. "He's only 5. A time to be selfish and cry." But he didn't, and it felt odd that he never called for his daddy or mommy. Imagining the reason made my heart ache. Afterward, following discussions with Michael and my parents, we decided to look after Tom in our home. At home, I prepared a kid's lunch with hamburgers and fries decorated with character flags. When I placed it in front of Tom, his eyes sparkled. "I've never seen anything like this. Can I really eat it?" he asked with amazement. "Of course. I made it for you, Tom," I replied. I loved the way he devoured it, ketchup all over his mouth, and a crunchy smile on his face. In the evening, Tom played around in the bath with Michael, laughing and enjoying. At night, I would read him picture books while lying next to him. He would listen intently with sparkling eyes, but then he would suddenly look at me with an anxious expression. "Can I stay here forever? I don't want to go back home anymore." "I get it. You want to stay here, right?" Tom nodded with relief, and it was heart-wrenching to see him that way. As the days went by, he became even more attached to me and Michael. When I was folding laundry, he would come over and offer to help. When I went shopping, he tried to carry my bags with his little body. Living together, I realized he was a kind and wonderful child. Michael and I, having grown so fond of him, started discussing adopting him, especially if John and his partner weren't planning to raise him. When I checked with the city office, I found that my brother and his wife had registered Tom's birth, and on the certificate of residence, the parents and Tom were living in my parents' house. We started consultations at the family court about a month after we took in Tom. John and a young woman came to visit. "Hey, thanks for taking care of Tom, lol." As soon as Tom saw them, he hurriedly hid behind me. He must have had some frightening experiences after years without seeing him. My brother looked more aggressive, and his clothes were unkempt. The young woman with him, who introduced herself as Riza, wore numerous piercings in her ears and nose, looking flashy like a playgirl. "How did you know where I live?" I asked. "Mom. By the way, sis, you're living in a nice house and having a great life, huh? And I have something to discuss regarding Tom." "Let me in," my brother insisted. I didn't feel good about it, but I couldn't refuse when it was about Tom. According to my brother, he had married this woman shortly after leaving home. They had been moving around frequently, and there were times when they lived in their car because they had no place to stay. While looking around my house, my brother suddenly got to the point. I heard from Mom that you don't have any children, right? You've been married for 10 years with no kids, so you probably can't have any, can you? He insinuated. What are you trying to say? I asked. We've got a great idea. If you want Tom, how about it? But it won't be for free, my brother proposed. I was stunned by the audacity of him trying to sell his son for money after attempting to leave him with our parents because he was annoyed. I was burning with anger. John, what do you think your child is? He's not an object. What's with the audacity of trying to sell him for money after having tried to leave him with our parents because you were annoyed? Because you're too serious. Our parents always sided with you. It's funny how you blame your parents and me for your own lack of success. Shut up. Just give me the money. Enraged, John raised his hand to hit me. At that moment, Tom, who had been hiding behind me, stepped forward. He spread his arms, trying to protect me from John. Seeing this, I became even more determined to protect Tom. Selling a child for money is unthinkable. However, I decided to give them the $13,400 I had saved in my dresser as a settlement. I also had them sign an agreement that they would never get involved with the child again and obtained their consent for the adoption. John's wife remarked, "It's refreshing not to have to raise such a troublesome child," surprising me with her coldness. Once the procedures were completed, the two took the money, smirked, and disappeared. And so Tom truly became our child, and we completed the necessary legal procedures. The following days were nothing but happiness. Tom grew up healthy, and we, as a couple, thanks to him, spent our days filled with smiles and joy. During this time, we noticed Tom's talents and wanted to nurture them. However, another incident occurred 15 years later. Once again, my younger brother and his wife came to visit. John had grown a scruffy beard. His hair was messy, and he looked rather thin. Although he should be only 41, he didn't look like it. The woman also had no makeup and was wearing dirty clothes and torn plastic sandals. It was immediately apparent that they had fallen on hard times and were living a rough life. I had a bad feeling, as their visit couldn't mean anything good, and my reliable husband Michael was out working that day. "What brings you here?" I asked. "I need some money." "Why should I give you any money?" I retorted. I thought Tom was just a stupid brat, but he got into a prestigious university's medical department, didn't he? John remarked. In reality, Tom was very intelligent. He had been at the top of his class since elementary school and even got into a prestigious medical school straight out of high school. "That's no longer your concern, is it?" I replied. "It's a big deal. He's my son. And since he's such an excellent son, I thought I'd take him back," John declared. Seeing my shock, John smirked. "If you don't like it, how about you give me $33,500? "Sister, didn't I already give you $13,400 15 years ago?" I questioned. "That's a different story. I can't give you such money," I firmly refused. John grabbed my collar and threatened me, asking if I wanted to get hurt. I felt more pain in my heart than my body. Looking at my thoroughly rotten brother, at that moment, someone shouted, "Stop it," and grabbed John's arm. It was Tom, who had grown into a sturdy 20-year-old. John was easily subdued and was lying face down on the floor. My brother's wife, seeing the grown-up Tom, said sweetly, "You've grown up. I'm your mom. I've wanted to see you." But Tom firmly declared, "My only parents are the mom and dad of this house. I remember the horrible things you did to me when I was just 5. I experienced love for the first time when I came to this house. You are not my parents." Even after hearing Tom's words, the two didn't seem to give up, so I showed them the agreement we made 15 years ago. In fact, the agreement stated, "We will have no future involvement with the child. If we do not comply, we will be sued." "You've broken your promise." "I'm calling the police," I warned them. They were visibly shaken, making excuses that they had completely forgotten about it. "Actually, we are being pursued by debt collectors. Without $33,500, we're in deep trouble. So, Don't be so cold. Help me out, sister. You are rich, aren't you? After threatening me earlier, he was now pleading. I can't help you. The moment you abandoned Tom, you severed ties with me too. I have no brother anymore. Please, I coldly rejected him. Helping him now would only encourage him to continue his behavior. As I was about to call the police, due to their insistence, they reluctantly left. Later on, I heard that the couple had been caught shoplifting and seemed to be in jail, leading a miserable life. Meanwhile, we three, Michael, Tom, and I, continue to live a peaceful and happy life. Seeing Tom, who wants to become a doctor to help those suffering from illnesses, makes me really happy. Thinking about it, we were able to live every day with laughter thanks to Tom. We hope to continue living happily together.